didn't have a lot of choice. Somebody in their early 20s, there's only a few choices. One of them is going in to work for the cartels, and the other one was going to work for the government.
Now, were you ever recruited? Did you ever get the opportunity to go work for the cartel or no?
I opted out and went for that police career. I always tell people that I'm a cautionary tale more than anything.
So what happens if you say, no, I just want to be straight? What do they do to you? Are you all of a sudden ousted and not trusted?
You're ostracized. There are basically small factions within a police group like that. Some of them work for one cartel, some of them work for the other. Sometimes you're just working and you're actually involved in some sort of interest that is way beyond your pay grade.
And you don't even know about it, meaning you don't know you're part of it.
You don't know you're part of it.
Military, police, or cartel? Who has more power?
Mexico doesn't have a single cartel. It has many. The New Generation Cartel, one of the biggest and growing cartels out there. Sinaloa Cartel, which are rivals of them.
How has the cartel made money during COVID?
Drugs, of course, human trafficking. And each of these cartels will pay for participation in what they do to different groups. You don't know who to trust, so it's hopeless.
And that's a powerful word for you to say, hopeless.
That's why I left that job. If you go into somebody's pocket, you're not climbing out.
My guest today for over a decade has worked in the fields of counter-narcotics, organized crime investigation, and public safety in northern border region of Mexico. And he's got enough crazy stories to make a 12-series show or documentary on Netflix. We're just trying to get a couple of the stories out today from the one and only Ed Calderon. Ed, thank you for being a guest on Valuetainment.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
So Ed, how does one wake up in the morning and decide to do what you're doing on a daily basis?
Being young and desperate in Mexico during an economic downturn. That's about it. It was. I always tell people that I'm a cautionary tale more than anything. I was in medical school after 9/11, and the economy tanked all over the country.
Interesting.
Specifically on the border because of the border restrictions. And I didn't have a lot of choice. Somebody in their early 20s. There's only a few choices. One of them is going in to work for the cartels, and the other one was going to work for the government in this new experimental police unit that they wanted to kind of put forward. So I opted out and went for that police career.
Now, were you ever recruited? Did you ever get the opportunity to go work for the cartel or no?
That was that's a process that happens when you get recruited into police forces. When you're in the police, when you sign up for this, they do a background check. They do an FBI background check. They look into your financials. They look at who your brothers and sisters are. All this type of stuff. That process begins when you sign up for recruitment. And then when you're inside the academy, every now and then they just start pulling people out of there. People that the FBI background checks take a while. So people that have some sort of history on the U.S. side criminally that doesn't show up in Mexican databases, or people that they find some sort of relationship with cartel members, that type of stuff.
So recruiting is you first go to become work for the government, and then the cartel recruits you away from the government to go work for them.
So sometimes that's the case. Sometimes they send young people just off the bat, apadrinados, as they call them. Apadrinados means somebody that's paying your way, basically. And that's common even to this day throughout a lot of police forces. People being there, showing up in a brand new Jeep to the recruitment center, which is pretty suspect, or just being inside, making their way through the whole academy process. And when they're active, they just start working for cartel interests from within police forces. A little bit of all of that happened. Some of the older guys working on would offer, hey, you want to work for us? And when you say, what do you mean us? Like us? Like, you know what? That's interesting, but I like being alive, and I also I'm just here to work. Is that I'm talking about 2004 era. That's a weird transitional time between the old way that things were done in Mexico and then the new drug war that was kicked off by Felipe Calderon. So you saw a massive purge in a lot of police forces, including the one I was a part of. with desperate measures being implemented, like consistently putting agents through polygraph exams, house visits, surprise house visits to all agents involved. And they would go into your bedroom and take a picture of your TV to see if it matches up the TV you had only last visit. And if you had a new one, you would have to explain how much
You
it was.
gotta be kidding me.
Oh, this is and
Well, they're smart for doing that, though. Good for them if they're getting that detailed.
it was a plan of it was a control and confidence plan that they had on a national level that didn't work for a simple reason. The higher ups didn't go through that control and confidence plan. That's why you started seeing high level people being arrested only recently that were part of all those efforts to kind of clean up police forces. It worked for a while, and there's a lot of research out there. There's a lot of papers out there talking about some of the only drug war successes on behalf of the Mexican government occurring in places like Baja, where I was really active in. And a lot of that had to do with the implementation of some of these things, like police certification processes coming in from the U.S. There's a international police certification process called CALIA, which is run by American police officers, and we went through it and were certified by that program. It wasn't easy, specifically for a police group in Mexico, to get through it. But they made a really good effort with us to try to keep us on the straight and narrow. The problem in the end was that every 6 years, Mexico goes through a case of self-inflicted amnesia. We're not a two-party system in Mexico. There's a few more parties than that.
Mm-hmm.
So Felipe Calderon went out. Central kind of leftist came in, and everything was kind of redone. Programs were canceled. Things were deemed unconstitutional, like having somebody go into your house and take pictures of your private life, or being polygraphed and having a polygraph examination be the means for which the government tells you can't work there anymore. That was deemed unconstitutional. So guess what happened to all these people that were purged out of some of these police forces during that massive attempt to clean up the police forces in Mexico? They all came back. Well, at least some of them. Those that didn't go to work for the cartels came back. And you saw basically, 6 years worth of trying to clean up a system that is deeply corrupted just go out the window. And now all these people are coming back. And recently you have a leftist president that basically just said, we're just going to start from zero. So meaning the National Federal Police is going to stop existing, and all the guys that went into police work as a career path, that doesn't mean anything anymore. You're going to get paid exactly like the field soldier that you're going to be working next with, and off you go, right? All of the things you did, all the stuff you did is now discounted. It doesnn't matter.
You're kidding me. So all the tenure, everything you did, you're going back to zero, no matter what you've done. Let me ask you, in 2004, when the one guy came up to you and says, do you want to be part of us? Do you want to be part of the team? And he said, no, I just kind of want to do my business. When he says us, he's saying like cartel, right? He's talking about, okay. Yeah. So now the question becomes, I watched a movie, I don't know, 8 years ago, where they're bad cops. And one of the guys who's working with them as a good cop, there's this opportunity for the bad cops to take money, and they tell this guy to take the money, and this good cop turns it down. And he says, no, I'm not going to take the money. I don't remember the exact movie, what it was. So he turns it down, but after turning it down, all of a sudden everybody turned against him. So what happens if you say, no, I just want to be straight? What do they do to you? Are you all of a sudden ousted and not trusted?
You're ostracized by that whole.
I can only imagine that. Yeah,
of a group. Now you have to realize these are multi-generational type groups. When I went in there, I was part of the 10th group going through training and then getting inside of that line of work.
Got it.
Now, mind you, this is not a police academy like the U.S. This is a paramilitary type training plan they had going on with with gafes. Gafes are what remember the Zeta cartel, which were former Mexican special forces guys.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the people that are training us in that academy setting were mostly all Gafe guys. So they were all old school Army SF guys, and training standards and humanitarian type treatment of people was not a thing in training. So I don't know if people out there have seen the old videos of guys running the line and getting AK-47s shot around them to simulate realism. I went through all that, which is completely retarded training. That's how you make somebody blind and deaf, right? It was a very irregular type of training there was basically a very big push to just create bodies to toss at the problem. And you get outside and you have people that are on there for a long time that are in charge, and you could start seeing how each of there are basically small factions within a police group like that. Some of them work for one cartel, some of them work for the other. A few of them are there on a career path, so they try to keep their nose clean on a straight and narrow. And you might not be involved in anything, but if somebody 2 or 3 levels higher up is, your actions are going to reflect his actions and his purpose. So
I bet.
It's not as simple as just being approached and getting money. Sometimes you're just working and you're actually involved in some sort of interest that is way beyond your pay grade or
you don't even know about it, meaning you don't know you're part of it.
You don't know you're part of it. When I got inside, there was a few factions that were pretty interesting to me, as far as people that were there because they had some sort of sense of they wanted to change things. There was a large group of young, very active people that were into the training side of it, that wanted to certify themselves, professionalize themselves. They really saw the promise of doing something differently.
Change for the better, meaning change for the better.
Making the job title that we had matter again, and not to be something that is, as it is now, completely vilified. Among the people that were there for that, there was a lieutenant colonel by the name of Leizaola, a legendary figure in the drug wars that happened in the border region. Career military individual, came out of the war college, highly trained. And basically came in as leadership for us. He had a zero tolerance policy, as far as any sort of corruption or any sort of irregularity. And the reason he was very successful in what he did is that he really put a lot of effort in recruitment. He was the first to kind of push forward internal investigation type things for the agents, and to build basically trust amongst the people working there.
Is he still alive?
He is, after many assassination attempts, many. The last one took the use of his legs. And he's been actively pursuing the office of mayor of Tijuana for the past 2 elections. They're blocking him anyway. The powers that be in Tijuana are blocking him, but he's very popular still with the people. He's often quoted as one of the most successful directors of some of this counter-narcotic operations in Mexico.
How old is he?
I think he's probably nearing his 60s now.
Got it.
He's exactly what the society needed at that point. There's a tendency internationally and in Mexico to consider the problems that we have in terms of a community policing problem or a national policing problem. The truth of the matter is this: policing matters do not usually involve criminal groups knocking down helicopters out of the air. They don't have to include transnational drug trafficking of a scale that hasn't been seen ever in our history. And it usually doesn't involve having more people disappear in a country and murdered in a country than in all of its history, even including some of the wars. It's an insane concept to kind of grasp.
Did you say Julian Leizaola?
Yeah, Julian Leizaola.
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 I'm looking at it right now. Controversial ex-soldier and police chief whose candidacy made headlines across Mexico. With 99% of ballots, Gonzalez was ahead by 152,000 compared to Lezola's 124,000. Ed, who's stronger in Mexico? Military, police, or cartel? Who has more power?
The military is behind all power in Mexico. That's my belief. As far as political power, as far as the military industrial complex, and as far as the weaponry and who gets to have weapons and what police forces get armed and what police forces don't. The military is a pretty powerful, it's a pretty powerful entity in Mexico.
Bigger more than cartel.
I'd say they're in depending on what you mean as far as power. You mean control all over the region of of Mexico?
I guess the part is does the cartel, most movies when you watch them, you see cops are bad cops. You don't see bad soldiers. You see more bad cops than you see bad soldiers. When you watch them, is there where the cartel and El Chapo type of a person there, Rafa Quintero, can call and say, hey, tell your people to kind of calm down and get out of here because they're making my life hard, or else ... Is there any relationship like that with cops and military?
I mean, we just had the release of General Cienfuegos, who was a high-level operator of the past administration in Mexico under Enrique Peña Nieto, and he was basically accused and recorded talking to cartel members about operations in central Mexico. A little bit of Beltran Leiva, which was a offshoot of Sinaloa cartel that became a very deep rival of El Chapo. So the military has many cases of corruption, and you could see a shift in confidence as far as U.S. and Mexico military ties. During the Felipe Calderon administration, they started shifting kind of all tip of the spear operations over to the Mexican Marines. The Mexican Marines were the ones that show up in the video in the El Chapo raid. Basically, they shifted over all kind of efforts towards them because they saw the Mexican military as compromised. Several instances have happened since then, starting with the Zetas debacle, basically a whole Mexican special forces unit going off and working for a cartel. So you saw a shift with that, but now you've also seen high-level arrest of Marina members protecting Sinaloa cartel guys, or 2 units of fully uniformed Mexican Marines taking part in abduction for ransom schemes. So realistic, I mean, it's only a matter of time when need kind of gets into some of these groups and forces people to work for one side or the other. That's the thing that people need to realize. Mexico doesn't have a single cartel; it has many. The New Generation cartel, one of the biggest and biggest growing cartels out there. Sinaloa cartel, which are rivals of them, and each of these cartels will pay for interest or pay for participation in what they do to different groups. So you can go into a town where the state police works for one cartel, the municipal police works for the other, the army works for another, and the Marines work for another, and the National Guard will work for another. So
does anybody not work for somebody, which is like the most hated? Is there anybody?
So I mean, it's
least compromised.
It's an interesting question, but it brings me back to the whole, you could be the cleanest guy out there. You can be working with a group of people that are completely verified, vetted, backgrounds checked, and you will have somebody above you in a directorial type position who does not go through all that process. So at its core, I think there's something wrong with the political class, and there's something wrong with putting forth such instruments of to try to filter out bad people in environments like that, and not have the people above you kind of be pushed to the same standards, basically.
What's the cleanest one where the people at the top are kind of like the Julian who ran for mayor? Who is the cleanest, most feared, uncompromisable guy at the top that annoys the hell out of the cartel?
Right now, there's no such figure.
Got
Right
it.
now, there's no such figure in my mind. At a time for a time, it was Lieutenant Colonel Lizaola. There's a reason why he was to assassinate so many times, right? And there's a reason why certain political class doesn't want him to see in control of the richest drug route on the planet, which is Tijuana. It's a sad thing for me to say as somebody from Mexico, that I don't see a clear top guy that the cartels would be afraid of on the government side.
That makes you think if there's nobody at the top, and if everybody at the top is dirty, are you also insinuating that pretty much anybody in Mexico to be president, you have to be dirty, you have to be connected to the cartel? Or no, you're saying there are some presidents that actually want a clean house?
I would say that even with the best intentions at the top, somebody within the group or the cabinet will be corrupted. We saw this with Martinez Luna, who was the head of Felipe Calderon's very stringent push towards cleaning up and doing whatever he was trying to do, which is specifically go after the cartels. And even then, you saw his top cop of Mexico being arrested on the U.S. side for connections to the Sinaloa cartel that came out after El Chapo's arrest. It's like, I remember this X-Files episode where there was a guy that would smoke, said, "Trust no one to Mulder." That's exactly it. You don't know who to trust, and you could be in the
terrible place to be.
You could be in the best office doing the best work, being one of the highest paid agents doing that type of work in Mexico, and you're great and you're on a career path, and all of a sudden leadership changes and now you're not, that all that goes away. So it's hopeless for people doing that work like myself that did that work for 12 years that really and there's a lot of people like me out there. It's not just bad cops. People always point at the bad ones and don't look at some of the good ones that they're out there still, or some of the guys that really wanted to professionalize what they were doing.
Yeah. And it's a powerful word for you to say hopeless.
It is very, I didn't see any hope. That's why I left that job. After only a year before, kind of thinking about not being able to leave that job because I was very specialized in what I did. So I couldn't see any sort of other form for me to maintain myself. But there comes a time, even in any job, and specifically that one, when you saw all of the top people that you would trust that were, they were on the right path as far as your life choices go, and see them all basically being removed and new people be put in place that you recognize completely as former people that you were told to watch out for.
Yeah, that's intense.
Yeah.
That's intense. How much of the flipping is caused by fear? How much of it's caused by money? Meaning, came in, I wanted to be a Marine, I wanted to be an Army guy, I want to be an SF guy, I want to go be a cop, I want to really make some change. At what point do I hit a wall where, kind of like what you hit in 2004? Am I influenced to flip through fear? If you don't do this, we're going to do this to your family, or here's $100,000, here's a Jeep, here's some money, here's women. How do people flip at that point?
The people that I saw go into it, it was always money first. That's the entryway. But there's a concept. If you go into somebody's pocket, you're not climbing out. Once you're paid, the association is made. If you would come to work for my police unit,
very true.
If you come to work for my police unit, and I as a cartel, somebody cartel member wants to buy your allegiance. Once he buys your allegiance, it's known that you are working for somebody. The reason why you get all these executions of cops during their off time, or even when they're working, is because the rival cartel finds out you're working for somebody that is opposed to their interests, so they kill you. That is kind of the entryway. once you get inside somebody's pocket, there's no going out. And the Lieutenant Colonel Lazaola quote: uh, the hand that steals or robs will always hide itself, but the one that spends will always give the other one away.
Say that one more time.
The hand that steals or robs will always hide itself, but the hand that spends will always give the other one away. So you would see people coming in without anything, and all of a sudden they had, there's a Hummer H2 outside, or their house has 3 stories, and as basically turning into a skyscraper type a deal in the middle of a semi-shanty town-esque area. Some of these guys are coming in from very poor communities, and all of a sudden they have money. And then you're like trying to compare. Wait, we have the same paycheck. How do you have a 3-story house? Or how do you have that new car? They're always basically ticking time bombs. I mean, it never lasts. None of that lasts. And if you don't continue on doing the work, then you get the lead, plata o plomo, a Colombian term.
Yep.
And also
Pablo.
Yeah, Pablo. Still used in Mexico. Plata o plomo. That's the choice. If you get the plata, you'll still get the offer of the plomo. Yeah. Even if you get the silver, which is the money,
yep,
you'll still liable to get the lead. So that's the offer basically. And a lot of the guys that I used to work with, a lot of them eventually went into one of those down one of those rabbit holes. Be it through pressure, be it through economic pressure, which people ask what corrupts the most. Need corrupts the most. Low paying wages in some places where people work in this type of line of work in Mexico. Social scorn. We would always have this joke that you're probably better off saying you're a male stripper than a cop when you're dating somebody in Mexico. There's less shame in the male stripper part of it, right?
Than being a cop.
Yeah. So imagine courting somebody down there. And
are you married, or are you married with kids, or no?
Not. I used to be married, not anymore.
Got it. Did you ever use that line yourself? Did you tell your wife, your ex-wife, "Hey, I'm a male stripper here in Mexico"?
Usually it's work for the government, and then they slowly kind of figure it out. And if they don't run when they figure it out, that's a good sign. But it was hard for people to stick around, specifically when you were gone for months on end.
I bet.
It's a pretty bad lifestyle.
And what's the craziest thing you've seen? I mean, with your life, what I mean, stuff that you can share. Obviously, some of the stuff I understand, it's stuff you can't share. But what did the life look like for the 12 years? I think you said 12 years you were in. What did it look like for the 12 years that you were in? What were some of the ugliest things you saw on a day-to-day basis?
I think like a moment. What people have moments in their life when they just figure out how crazy things might be in their time and space. I was involved in I was called in for a situation that happened at the Tijuana prison, a major riot happening inside of the Tijuana prison. And if people want to know what the Tijuana prison is like, or was like, there was a movie called Get the Gringo by Mel Gibson, which depicts a fictional version of what that prison was like. It used to have whole families living in it. It used to have armed prisoners inside, basically guarding their criminal nest. It was a pretty bad place. It was cleaned up, but still, gangs inside of it controlled certain aspects of it. Giant, massive riot happens within it. Some of the inmates disarm the security forces on the inside, raid armories, start beheading people. It was an insane scenario. The prison itself is in the middle of a large population center in Tijuana, which is a big mistake, but that's how Mexico is. We just We do things live. Um, as the riot is going on inside of the prison, there's also a riot of the family members outside. So it's explosive. I am about to sit down for dinner after being moved from the operational group I was with, where we would react to things like this. I was about to start a job as a bodyguard for a politician, and all of a sudden all of us get the that bat signal call, right? So I get there, I kind of walk around trying to figure out who's in charge, and then I quickly realize there's nobody in charge. There's the army's there, the municipal police is there. The director of the municipal police is on one end telling them they're using non-lethal rounds on the outside, and on the other end there's people with army people with military rifles shooting live rounds into the prison. So it's a pretty insane and hectic situation. Um, everything everything there just starts getting completely insane as soon as it goes dark. I'm trying to figure out basically who to join up with, and eventually, amongst the crowd of people, we start kind of recognizing each other, and we all start kind of agglomerating into a single group to try and figure out how to best gain entry into the prison system, into the prison courtyard to make entry, and amongst all these people, of course, there's Lieutenant Colonel Lazola kind of taking control of everything. It was probably one of the scariest, nightmarish places that I've ever seen in my life. From what was going on outside, seeing all those mothers cry for their sons and their daughters inside of that prison, to then seeing some of the wives and daughters and sons of some of the border guards that were killed on the inside, waiting to see if their loved ones were coming out or not. CS gas, gunfire, Molotov cocktails, bottles of ammonia and chlorine being thrown at us from the inside. Basically, little small chemical grenades. It was a horrific night that still kind of get. I remember it every now and then.
How old were you at the time when that was happening? What year was that?
I think I was probably I probably reached 30 at this point. I can't remember exactly what year it was, but I was in my 30s. There's videos of it on YouTube. It was a pretty horrific night.
There's videos of the event on YouTube from the Tijuana jail.
Yeah, there's videos of the event. When you remember things like that, you kind of sometimes certain details kind of bring that memory back. I was in Portland a few months ago during day 101 of the riots in Portland.
Mm-hmm.
And I was standing amongst a group of Antifa members, kind of observing what they were doing. And a snack cart rolled through the grouping, handing out Red Bulls and water. And then the state police threw a CS gas canister towards our way. And I was standing there, and everybody was running away. And the CS canister was 5% CS gas, so it basically made your eyes watery and your nose kind of itchy. And I saw the amount of chaos that was happening in this very beautiful community on the U.S. side. And then I remembered what I went through on the Mexican side, and kind of trying to figure out how these both of these moments in my life kind of related. I don't know. It's a weird kind of space to be in right now, seeing the U.S. as far as what it's going through, and how there's true strife in other parts of the world. And
that's true. It's crazy you're saying that. I left Iran. My family left Iran to bring us here for a better life, and you left Mexico to come over here for a better life. What do you see with what's taking place here in the U.S. with the madness, especially this last year, with everything going on with election, COVID, Portland, Chicago, L.A., everything that's going on here? What are your thoughts on what's happening to America?
Well, I get paid by people, companies, and the government every now and then hires me to show them how to work in environments that are rife with lawlessness, strife, places where you have to take responsibility for your own security. That's my thing, right? I do classes on austere medical management to how to not get into abduction scenarios and what to carry and when you travel, that type of thing. So when I go to places like Portland, Kentucky, Atlanta, when there was a riot, I was in Atlanta when the riots kicked off as well. I'm there to observe and record and see if I can come up with some sort of solution for people moving in environments like that. One thing that surprises me is that I was running away from things like that, and all of a sudden I find myself in a place where these things are kind of slowly kind of producing themselves and manifesting themselves. Um, Things like cancel the police, or disband the police or whatever, and you're looking at that and seeing places like LA where people would just walk in with a shopping bag and just fill their bags up and leave. Seeing certain counties up in Portland that have no police at all. Something happens in some of those environments, there are no police coming. Seeing how that's what people want to push towards. When I come from a place where the Sinaloa cartel beat the military in Culiacan. You want to talk about canceling the police. That's right. It's amazing to me, and it's also amazing. Again, being an immigrant. You're from Iran. You can kind of share the same point of view. How you arrive to a place where things are different in good ways and in bad ways. I'm not saying everything's great. But the good ways you see people complaining about some of those good ways because that's where they grew up with, or that's what it's been there. Every now and then I have to knock a few Americans in the mouth and tell them, you bathe every day in drinkable water and you flush a toilet with potable water. So maybe not having romaine lettuce in the market and complaining to the manager about it might not be the best thing to do with your energy. Speaking to other immigrants as myself to this country, I met a very old school probably in the 60s, just became an American Vietnamese man, very conservative in his views. His sons are not so much the same way. He was asking me about my political views, and I told him, I just want the freedom to. I just want the opportunities which I already have, which I came to this country without anything. I've been working my fingers to the bone, and traveling, just trying to make a life for myself. And I've had nothing given to me, and I've had all the opportunities that I could have wanted. Right. So if somebody like me can do it, there shouldn't be a problem with there shouldn't be a problem with the dream if somebody like me can get it. And on his side, he said, yeah, that's right, but everybody wants a
handout.
I don't want to say that word, but it's fascinating seeing a culture be outraged by things like the Black Lives Matter movement, talking about slavery's history in this country, when there's actual active slavery in this country right now, and it's Mexicans working in fields, paying off their people smugglers to be in this country. So if I have to pay the people that put me into this country through work in a field somewhere, I'm a slave. There's actual slavery in this country right now that people don't talk about. When COVID was on, who the essential workers were? People picking some of that produce. It's interesting thing to think about, and some of these people have to pay their ability to stay in the country and the ability for their families to cross that border, the coyotes and criminal groups. So, things to think about, perspectives.
Big time. That's big time perspective on what you just said right there. Makes you really think on what's really going on over here. You were talking about earlier, I looked at the data between the mayor that won and mayor that lost. Julian, he had 124. the one who won, had 155,000 votes. How much of voter fraud happens in Mexico? Do they trust voting in Mexico? How bad is it in Mexico?
It's amazing to say, but voting is pretty legit in Mexico as it is. Everybody has a federal voting card um, with a clear picture ID. They're pretty good at keeping track of that. They are.
Stuff that we don't want to do in America, they're doing in Mexico.
Yeah, and we don't have an electoral college, but what we do have is a weird political system with new parties coming into play all the time. Allegiances between these parties each go around. So, you know, it's a pretty interesting game of musical game of chairs going on. What you see mostly though is money and interest in places like Tijuana. So Tijuana has a large public transport union, for example. Tijuana is if a 10-year-old would write down his image of a city with a crayon on a white page as he was going down a cobble street road, that's what Tijuana is. You know, it's a mess of a city. You know, urban planning came in at the middle part of it. You know, there's taxi system that is not doesn't exist anywhere in the world. It's a mess of a place. But money is eventually is in the end what runs it. Interesting to see in a COVID era. You can go to Tijuana right now, and you'll see a bunch of apartments being built up into the skyline now. The Tijuana is growing upwards now, so it's a sign of how it's growing economically, which wouldn't make sense for a post-COVID era or a COVID era type economy.
I don't think I've ever seen a high rise, and I've been to Tijuana so many times. I've never once seen a high rise.
If you go down there now, you'll be pretty surprised by the
Wow.
buildings going up now.
Interesting.
And you would say, well, why is that? You know, and I don't want to be one that talks about conspiracies, but my whole thing is that the only reason why money hasn't stopped pumping into a place like Tijuana, even during COVID, is because there's interest in Tijuana that are irregular, and some of these irregular interests usually pump their money through legal means to clean it up.
How has the cartel made money during COVID?
Drugs.
What drugs? Same drugs or any other kind of drugs right now?
Marijuana legalization in places like California and Denver pushed the cartels into looking for options. One of the options they found is that the heroin market was not really kind of covered by some of these cartels. Although heroin has been grown in Mexico for years, it was just not really specifically a cash crop for them, one they would focus on mainly. So legalization of marijuana in places like California and places like Denver, Colorado pushed some of these criminal groups into start investing in heroin production. I'm talking, probably a decade back. They produced a very low quality heroin, probably something to do with the soil richness and having some of these places consistently planted with marijuana for years. And they figured out that you could give it a kick by adding fentanyl or carfentanil into the product. So that's they figured that out during the crackdown on legal opiate prescriptions in the U.S. So it was a perfect time and place for their product to come into the U.S. and fill that void that was left behind.
The challenge with heroin as a product is your customer doesn't survive. It's even a drug dealer knows that you don't want your clients to be dying, or else you don't have repeat customers. And heroin is not good for a drug dealer who wants to continuously make money. At least weed, you go smoke it, you come back. Some of the other ones, you don't kill yourself. Heroin is as deadly as it can be. Are some of them getting into the pills nowadays, or no? Are they doing pills?
Heroin, methamphetamine of a quality and purity that is
sure
is industrial.
Yep.
That's their thing. Cocaine coming in from South America through Mexican cartel hands is still a thing for people that are wondering. But I think the move right now for a lot of these groups is going into bogus or fake pain medication, which is just basically fentanyl or carfentanil, um, being pumped into the consumer
Heroin.
market, U.S. side, yeah, uh, in pill form. There's recently been a few large busts in Mexico related to the new generation cartel, where they found a bunch of industrial new pill presses to fabricate pills, and this has been happening for a while now. But they're putting more effort into that now.
I had Hector Bayareza on recently, and he's the one from the show, I think The Last Narc, that came out, I think, on Amazon.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with Hector. And him and I were having a conversation together a few weeks ago, and we talked about Rafa Quintero, who Rafa came out and, there's an old interview of Rafa, how confident he is. He's got the swagger, good looking. I'm sure you've seen that video because it's been in many different music videos. And then you see the new one that's saying, I'm not as powerful. I don't have any money. I'm poor. People are taking care of me. And there's a lot of different, not necessarily conspiracy stories where some say this guy is so powerful that he's playing weak. And some are saying, no, he's actually very poor. What do you know about the power and the influence of Rafa Caro Quintero?
He's active. There's no doubts about it. He's working in Sonora with the family members. Basically, there are family members of him already running things in the region, and he moved in there, and he's currently it's in the know that he's taken control of that organization for the people that were actually still there. Rafael Caro Quintero has been in the game since it started. He's one of two people that have originally, started some of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Still there. Interesting to see that he is at the top of the list for U.S. interests as far as drug kingpins in Mexico. When it's widely known by most Mexicans that the head of the Sinaloa cartel, El Mayo Zambada, is probably, the oldest, most active, and most in control individuals in all of Mexico right now when it comes to some of these activities. But somehow he's not at the top of the list. Caro Quintero, he's the quintessential narco, swagger, the way he would dress, all the expenses he would go through, ranches, all that stuff. Yeah, that's where a lot of that culture comes from. That prototype of a individual. That's where a lot of it comes from.
Is he a feared guy, or is he a respected guy, or is he both?
He's both. He's both. He's a folk hero, just like El Chapo, just like El Mayo Zambada, just like all of these names out there. They're in their communities and in the popular culture. They're folk heroes. Interesting to see things like Netflix building shows around some of these people, how they, inadvertently have made a whole generation of people know the names, know them, and humanize who they are and what they do. And you have a lot of kids that were my age when I was coming up, seeing the validity of going into that type of life, maybe of wanting to set a name for yourself in that way. It's fascinating how they've normalized it in a way. They've normalized the culture, the lingo, the who's who, and kind of this is just how things are,
I mean, in a way, the show is educating people about the business model. It's educating you and turning them in a hero. You're almost rooting for the bad guy. It's a weird thing that happens when you're watching these things. Even when you were watching Pablo, Steve Murphy is a good friend of mine, the DA agent, and Javier Pena. Steve was just here, I think, a few days ago. He was here with us last week, and we did an interview with them a couple of years ago, Who Killed Pablo Escobar? And they got a few million views, and they did the whole narc on him. And one of the things he didn't like about the show Narcos is the fact that you liked him. You're like, they showed him in a positive way where you're kind of like, this Pablo guy's a genius. The Pablo guy's a visionary. You kind of, it inspired a lot of kids to say, I want to be like him when I grow up, type of thing. Maybe in a different space, but going back to a Rafa Quintero or some of these other guys that are out there right now, What needs to happen for this to come to an end? Meaning, who wants it to stop? Who doesn't want it to stop? Because there's different motives. And which of these two is more powerful? The ones that want to stop versus the ones that don't want it to stop? Who has more power?
Well, I could start with uh, two of the biggest, two maybe three of the biggest products that the Mexican cartels make their money off of. Uh, drugs, of course, but another one that people don't talk about a lot is people smuggling or human trafficking. Um, they make a lot of money off human trafficking and taxing people even after they have gone across the border and utilizing some of these people as indentured servants, from sex trafficking, which is a common thing, to running local drug markets in Mexico. People don't kind of figure that part of the equation out. It's not just cartels moving drugs into the U.S. They also run local drug markets and make them a lot of money. Uh, so that is another issue. And then realize that all of these substances, and the fellow businesses that they run around trafficking drugs across the border, like people smuggling, like contrabanding and putting money into businesses that are necessarily legal, but now they have the illegal money go into legal money.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
All of that is fueled by a large country like China. What I mean by this is that there's no way that drugs can sell heroin laced fentanyl, fentanyl laced with heroin to the States without the ability to procure and fabricate fentanyl. And all of that comes from China. All of it comes from China, and there's no way they can get anything out of China without Chinese state knowing about it. I mean, it's not Chinese triads working with the cartels, taking barrels of it of fentanyl into Mexico, or meth precursors. That's not how it works. That's not how anything works in China. So you clearly see a big influence in regards to fabrication, in regards to precursors, and in regards to things like fentanyl being still available for groups that were on the Pacific side of the Mexican continent during COVID, in control of ports. Fentanyl was still available to them even during COVID lockdown. So that's something that people should kind of look into. Like, why was that a thing? So then you see this component of China probably being involved in a way, fostering some of these groups in their production. Now, that's not conspiratorial. There's a lot of studies, and a lot of people have gone to China to see where some of these chemicals are produced. And it's
What's the motive? It can't just be money. What's the bigger motive? It can't just be money.
If I mean, I think it's regional destabilization is what I think the motive might be. Another motive might be the fact that Mexico has a lot of resources. Mexico might be the next Africa for the Chinese interest as far as their expansionism. They want some of the resources in Mexico. So it's not out of the realm of possibilities to say that that's one of the reasons why you see, and you've already seen, things like illegal iron ore mined by Chinese companies in Mexico. That's happened, right? So it's not out of the realm of possibility to say that they have their eyes on Mexico as a means of expansion.
Now, is the difference between Mexico and Africa? I can see Africa. I can see why a lot of people target Africa, but Mexico, is there any motive from China, Mexico, because it's bordering the U.S. border? And yes,
I mean, I'd say yes. I mean, there was a clear void made by the U.S. in Mexico at the start of the Trump administration. Trump announced a series of bringing jobs back to the U.S., and a lot of U.S. plants moved their operations out of Mexico and back to the U.S. This was done with a lot of political jargon behind it, by Trump, to kind of make America great again and America first type thing. But in kind of in a way, I think people thought it was his way of punishing Mexico for being you know as as permissive as they were with their borders and allowing people to move through the border or something. But then you kind of see this whole all of the void left by those U.S. companies was filled by Chinese companies. Most of those interests that were left behind by the U.S. and Mexico were immediately filled up by Chinese interests. And you see a clear influence in things as simple as going into an open air market in Mexico City and seeing a bunch of Chinese-made products all over the place. Even bootleg stuff that shouldn't be legally allowed to be sold, but it's sold in informal commerce all over Mexico. It's a pretty big business partner for them. So it's interesting to see how they're influencing things at a economic level on that side,
Mm-hmm.
industrial side, and also there's no other place where some of these cartels can get some of the precursors they're using for fabrication.
Now, is China doing it because China also wants Mexico to not get very organized and under control? Do they want the havoc to continue because the more havoc, the more they get involved? Is that what you would say? Or do they want to see it being a little bit more stable than it is today?
I mean, it should be clear that Mexico has enough resources as a country to be a first world country. It has everything it needs. But for some reason, destabilization has been going on at a political level in Mexico for years. And it's not just from Russia or China. It's also been the U.S. has been complicit in some of these things that happened in Mexico's history. It's interesting to see a place like Mexico. There's a saying in Mexico, México tan lejos del cielo y tan cerca de Estados Unidos. Mexico, far from heaven but close to the United States. It talks about the symbiotic relationship that both of these countries have. There is a clear interest. There are clear U.S. interests in Mexico. It is in the U.S.'s best interest to keep Mexico stable. And it's
Good.
also, and economic wise, it's in its best interest to keep its second largest consumer of American products happy, which is Mexico again, which is interesting to kind of say. So you would have to then think about who would be against all that. Well, your biggest global rival right now is China. So it's interesting to see Mexico being a quasi Vietnam type arena in the future for what could happen between these two large superpowers, basically having a vested interest in this country that we call Mexico.
It's going to be very, very interesting. How much have things changed? You said something. You said you can be working as a cop in Mexico, and then all of a sudden in Tijuana, everything's going good because your boss is good, and then all of a sudden things change, and you're going back from beginning again because now you don't know what their lineage is, to which cartel, who their loyalty is, and you got to kind of adjust, so you can't really trust anybody. How much do things change for the cartel in Mexico and the people of Mexico when there's an administration of Trump versus a Biden? How big of a change is it going to be for Mexico under a Biden administration?
Well, I can tell you this: the peso has been pretty stable with Trump in power on the U.S. side, and I think that has a lot to do with his relationship with Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, who's a leftist, which is pretty interesting that they had a good relationship, right?
And he's a leftist, almost like a socialist leftist, right?
Yeah.
He's like a Bernie Sanders of Mexico.
Yeah, he's very much pro-open, pro-Maduro, pro-Chavista. They just put a statue of El Che Guevara and Fidel Castro in a park in Mexico City, which, I mean, historically it makes sense. They met there, and that's where they planned the revolution. But it's interesting seeing politics going that way. For people that know, politically, the capital of Mexico is our California. Mexico City is very to the left, and it's what's pulling interest right now. You usually see the conservative side of Mexico to the north in places like Baja or Monterey. That's where, or Guanajuato traditionally was very conservative as well. But now you're seeing this trend of populism going into the left side of the political spectrum. People obviously just sick of drug war that was started by the conservatives, was fostered then by some of the central leftist guys, and then now the left has taken it and just turned it into a amnesty type relationship with cartels, and talking about hugs, not gunshots, as a counter cartel effort in policy. You know. Um,
how is politically, how is Michoacan or Jalisco, how different are they? Are they conservative? Are they more liberal? Are they in the middle? Where are they at?
Most of Mexico is Catholic, so very conservative. But with people are just sick, right? They're sick of how things are. So you see somebody at the extreme of the political spectrum, like Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, who's like completely outside of anything anybody would have voted for 6 years, 7, 8 years ago. And that's desperation. They bet on him basically, and he won by a long stretch, longest stretch that anybody's ever won it in a while. But it's been two of our most horrific years as far as violence goes in Mexico. You can see the COVID epidemic handling by this administration has been pretty dire.
What's going to happen with Biden? How's Biden going to influence? You just said Mexico peso stays stable. It's pretty solid. He was even able to make it work with the president of Mexico. But what's going to happen with Biden?
Well, last time we had Obama, you saw debacles like the Fast and the Furious, which again people say it was inherited by the past administration, but it was very fostered by that administration. During the Obama administration, the economy was in and out down in Mexico, and we saw an influx of immigrants coming in from all over, going through the country and shifting things in a lot of ways. The whole, and I witnessed some of this, the whole children just arriving by the busful on the border. That was pretty interesting and surreal. But main thing is that you saw the clear proliferation and growth of a single cartel in Mexico was the Sinaloa cartel. And you saw a lot of weapons handed by the Americans let walked across the U.S. border, and nobody was informed on the Mexican side of these guns all of a sudden showing up in places like the places where I worked, where all of a sudden you were seeing cartel guys carrying around 50 cals. Or FN-57 pistols that go through soft body armor. It was debilitatingly, humiliating for a lot of Mexicans witnessing that type of policy being implemented to a neighbor, right? I think that started fostering what we're still kind of going through as far as anti-Americanism in Mexico. And I don't know. I don't know what it's going to look like in a Biden era. I know that permissive drug policies on the U.S. side usually mean growth for cartels on the Mexican side. So, places like Oregon that just legalize everything.
That's right.
It's basically going to be a giant economic boost for the cartel that runs drugs into that area, because now they have a bigger market. So every time you see a shift into a permissive environment in places like U.S., you'll see a shift and or a growth. California legalizes pot. Well, cartels move people of theirs into California to grow pot illegally in public lands. And then you see them go into the legal market as well in certain ways. And they still pump in illegal weed from Mexico into the U.S., mix it with some of the California stuff and sell it. So, and also that freed up their fields on the Mexican side so they can grow heroin. So, again, it's a weird kind of back and forth. Full legalization I don't think is going to work for cutting some of these problems in places like Mexico. And Mexico is on the verge of legalizing weed.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing for the cartel?
If there's no way you can have a giant weed grow in Mexico without paying off the cartel for protection, otherwise they'll just run in there and steal your plants. Which leads me to believe that they have some sort of involvement already in the growth, taxation, and protection of
Makes sense. That makes a lot of sense because you got to go through them. Because you got to go through. Is it a similar model to the Italian mob in New York and Philadelphia and how they ran it, where we offer you protection, you give us 20% of whatever profits you make. If you lie, we take you out. Is it a similar model like that or a little bit more vicious? Because at least one of the things about the Italian mob was if you respected them, they respected you. You know, they didn't bother you. They had certain code they lived by. Or would you say the cartel is a lot more vicious than the Italian mob?
They're a lot more vicious. They're a lot more overt. They are not afraid of the government. So in some of these ways, they might differ. What usually happens is they call it cobro de piso, or basically paying for the floor. It's a taxation thing, and that's another big money influx into cartels all over Mexico, paid for protection or extortion. So you get it. Basically, you'll set up a grow field somewhere down there. This may or may not be the story of somebody that I already talked to about it, because they set up a grow down there and they were surprised by this. They set up a grow somewhere where it's very beautiful, and that's where you would want to grow something like this. And they were immediately approached by somebody who was a lawyer representing some sort of interest, and basically selling them on the fact that if you want to grow anything here, you're going to have to pay a tax. And we're going to have people come in to evaluate what that tax is going to be. So you say, oh, you mean your government tax? No, piso, right? It gets complicated when this happens. It gets complicated when the cartel ruling that region gets into a fight with another cartel who might want to rule that region. So if I'm coming into your territory, all the people that are paying you for protection, I'm going to burn their stuff. I'm going to harass them. I'm going to steal their pot fields. And that's going to lead into a wider conflict, which, again, it's another thing that's fueling conflict out there.
There you go. So, it's ongoing. It's nonstop. Yeah. Nonstop. I want to show you a video here, and I want to get your reaction because I learned a lot about, the military, cops, cartel, who's got more power. This is a video of El Chapo's son getting arrested. You've seen this before when he's coming in, a woman comes out. But I want to get your reaction from it and just kind of see what you're saying about this when you see this. Let me pull this up. Here we go. Okay.
So that's a federal police unit from Mexico. They're doing recording on their camera helmet cams, and that video feed is actually going live into Mexico somewhere. That usually runs some of these operations remotely as well. That is not the people that you would take to arrest a high value target like El Chapo's son.
That is not who you would take. You're saying.
No. That is not who you would take.
So why are they there?
Because they completely found this guy by surprise, and they are just basically on a patrol. They decide to raid this house that apparently had people armed in there, and they find this high value target in the form of El Chapo's son. You can see them behind. You can see him hand something to a man behind him in a bit.
Yep, the man behind him right there. Yep.
He hands something. What he hands off is a gun.
Got it.
Probably a gun that he hands out behind, which is, again, if somebody has a gun on them, he's going to get shot. You see all the rifles they're carrying?
Yep.
No optics on them? These guys are patrol guys. They're not the guys that you would send for an operation like this. They don't have any equipment. They don't have suppressors on their guns. They don't have any optics. So they're not a top tier group that you would send after somebody like this.
But how come they're not afraid? How come they're not being, fearful? They're not afraid. They seem pretty confident. They're pushing around. They're not.
If it was me there, everybody would be zip tied on the ground. But they're taking very special precautions to not treat anybody badly. They're very, very specific precautions to not hurt anybody. And that is all indications of fear, and they know exactly what they're in for if anybody finds out what they're doing. And of course, everybody found out what they were doing. That's why they had the whole of Sinaloa cartel surround the city to rescue him.
So what happened after this? What happened after this while we're watching this?
You would never allow somebody like that to have a phone and keep calling somebody on the phone.
Got it.
Right.
So from your perspective, it shows that they're so respectful of him that they're letting him make a phone call. Versus you and your division, you would have him on the ground, and his hands would be handcuffed and tied up.
Anybody that went through the training that I had, and a lot of the training was from U.S. source, would have everybody on the ground, and we would have a very superior force there if we were going after somebody like that. It's interesting to see that they took all these precautions and all this. They let him have all this leeway, and that is because they knew exactly what they were in for. When it comes to having somebody of that high nature that you just found, you're kind of hands off. That means that it's complete surprise. So there was no planning, there was no operation to get him. It was pure luck that they found this individual there. They get orders to send him to a secure location in a federal building in Sinaloa and Culiacan, the capital. And that's when the whole of the Sinaloa cartel criminal organization arms up every single male member of their organization in the region. And they start driving and pumping in from all sorts of places, far and wide. A massive congregation of armed men and armored vehicles, 50 caliber, support technicals, basically, as they call them, tied to the back of trucks, anti-aircraft capabilities active across the city to avoid any sort of incursion by military forces via helicopter to try and extract El Chapo's son. And they surrounded the barracks where the family members of the military would stay in the state, basically taking them hostages. And there's a bunch of videos out there. I posted up some on my Instagram account when it happened, of the cartels basically surrounding military forces and then having them shake hands in agreement that they were not going to move on anybody. You saw this massive event, and they let him go. And the president came out and said they let him go to avoid further bloodshed. But most of the people involved in that I talked to said that they let him go because they got the order from the people there to let him go. Right.
When you say they got the order from the people to let him go, who are the people to let him go? Government or El Chapo's people?
The government people there did not want to give up their lives for
got it
individuals. So.
Who's more powerful, El Chapo's family or Rafa Quintero?
I think right now it's a regional thing. Some of them control different regions. Some of them control different drug routes. I'd say the Sinaloa cartel as a whole, El Chapo's kids and El Mayo Zambada's faction, as a whole, that they are still the dominant cartel force all across the border and in northern Mexico. I'd say for a rival, you have to look at New Generation Cartel, run by a former Mexican police officer named Mesio Ceguera Cervantes. That he is poised. He's poised to be the next the top guy.
Former Mexican police officer.
Former Mexican police officer was in and out of the system on the U.S. side.
Wow.
For trafficking.
Same feared and respected guy like Rafa, or
the Mesio has a way more of a high profile as far as fear. He's respected and feared. He has a expansionistic kind of approach to the way that his cartels are moving in the country.
Interesting.
More militaristic, basically.
He's had the training. I mean, he's got all the training to be able to use some of that training.
He not only has the training, but he also is very widely known in Mexico as an importer of talent. There's been testing fields for things like drone bombs and improvised mortar explosive systems that you would see in places you would see in use by the IRA during the Troubles. So he's obviously bringing in people from probably Colombian FARC ex-Colombian FARC people that are aware of guerrilla tactics and warfare to I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if I see some people from the former IRA members probably assisting and or adding into the knowledge base. So you're seeing that. You're seeing rumors of military type training camps run by former U.S. SF guys, which is, I've never been able to confirm any of it, but there's rumors of Americans basically working down there and training them.
Wow.
You see elements of that in how they carry their gear, how they set up rifles and stuff like that. I've seen a few things that I then share with some of my counterparts on the U.S. side, and they're like surprised by the level of detail that they have. He has a big push to recruit former military, former police into his forces.
So he's a visionary type of guy. He's got a vision.
He has a vision. I think he's poised to be the next. The new generation cartel is poised to be the next dominant cartel in Mexico.
Is there a possibility of one of these guys eventually being the president of Mexico? That's not possible. Like, how Pablo wanted to be president. Is there one of these guys that wants to say, what Pablo couldn't do, I'm going to end up doing?
I think they have the possibility to put somebody in the presidency that's completely compromised. Yes.
But not themselves. Like this person you're talking about, not him. He couldn't pull it off.
So one of the main arguments against naming cartels in Mexico a terrorist organization is the inability of people to explain what their political motivations are. So that's kind of a classic element that you have to add into a terrorist organization. Cartels don't seemingly have political inclinations and or motives, but political killings are rampant all over Mexico. So it's clear that some of these criminal groups do want somebody to be elected.
So it's a lot of it, mainly money, freedom, power, and that's it. Is that kind of just their play? That's the vision. Let me see how much money I can collect, or is there something bigger than money?
Most of the guys that make it a long time, El Chapo had a lot of this, and El Chapo wasn't the guy that the U.S. government kind of painted him out to be. El Chapo Guzman was painted out to be the head of the Sinaloa cartel organization by the U.S. government, and he was not. He was probably number 2 or number 3 in the big scale of things, and he wasn't the man. He wasn't the head guy. It's always been El Mayo Zambada, El Chapo's basically compadre. But again, it's a weird kind of thing to see how he's not he's put in that realm.
Is that a known thing? Is that a known thing amongst the people?
It's a known thing amongst people. It's a thing that's been coming out more and more after El Mayo Zambada's son wrote a book called El Traidor that is out there. Highly recommend you check that book out. He talks a little bit about this, how he kind of it's weird how they focused on just El Chapo as kind of a focal point, and it probably has a lot to do with how he embarrassed the Mexican government by escaping from prison so many times and exposing the corruption within it. He was a bigger than life individual. I think you're seeing a shift now, and you see shadowy ghost figures like Nemesio Ceguera, El Mencho. He's a different character. Rarely appears in pictures. I mean, there's only a few pictures of him out there. He doesn't do interviews. He doesn't go on. He's not one of those guys. So he kind of like melds into the background. So he's a different guy now.
Meyer Lansky type of guy. Are you familiar with Meyer Lansky? Meyer Lansky was the one of the 4 mobsters with Ben Siegel, with Lucky Luciano, with Frank Costello, and Meyer Lansky was the guy that ran Cuba, and eventually he was ousted because he had a nice hotel business. He was known for being a billionaire, rich guy. And he's like, I'm just a regular guy, but he didn't want any attention. It was very quiet, but he didn't like the camera. He didn't want any of the camera, but people knew he had a lot of power.
Yeah, again, Mexico. It's its own problem. The reason why the U.S. doesn't want to designate these groups as terrorist organizations has more to do with immigration than it has to do with actual.
Because they can come here asylum. Is that kind of what you're thinking? Like, Meg, that makes sense. That totally makes sense.
And but they fit every single they tick every box if you kind of look at them. ISIS videos circulated on social media as a weapon, that doesn't come from the Middle East. That comes from narcoblog. That comes from cartel torture videos being circulated before ISIS was a thing online, and then them seeing the power and the value of exporting or transmitting a horrible event that happened somewhere in the woods and Michoacan, and exporting that to their enemies and also just to the general public. Um, that's a terrorist tactic, and they don't seem to be wanted to. You don't see the effort to call them what they are.
Ed, how are you able to talk about this stuff? Are you safe? Is anyone coming after you? I mean, does anyone mind you educating the world on this stuff? Because you're getting on many different platforms. You're revealing a lot of different things. Are they happy with you?
I'm not the only one talking about these things. There's people like Anabel Ochoa, the one that wrote that book.
The Traitor.
The Traitor. There's who is a legit. She's legit as they come. She's if you want to talk about somebody revealing truths that are dangerous, I'd worry about her more.
Got it.
I am coming from the perspective of somebody that just worked in that environment and has been then put into the field of kind of observing to then teach about these types of environments. Of course, I'm worried, but I'm not worried about revealing anything that isn't known.
Got it.
I think if anything, I have a perspective which is pretty unique because I actually worked on the ground floor of a lot of the stuff as far as how it's been evolving and happening. I was never, involved in any of the illegal side of it, so I don't have a fear in that regard. But yes, I have a fear. If you want to talk about fear, I fear what my home country is gonna be in 10 years. I fear for the people that live in rural communities in Mexico that have no cops, no military to go to, just cartel members, and seeing some of their daughters be made disappear after they go to a narco party somewhere. That's what I fear. That's not. I fear a whole generation of people like me growing up with that as normal. I grew up in Mexico in the 80s and the 90s. That wasn't the stuff that I see now wasn't normal.
Where do you live now? You live in the States? Are you in America now?
I live in the States. Yeah.
Got it. And where were you born in Mexico? What part of Mexico? Were you in Tijuana or?
Tijuana.
You were born in Tijuana.
I'm one of the rare Tijuana natives. Most people in Tijuana, even when I would go to school, they would have the question, "Hey, who was born in Tijuana?" You would see a few hands raised. It's mostly a transitory space.
It's an interesting Tijuana, San Diego. I used to go to Revolution. Is it Revolution Avenue or Boulevard?
Revolution Avenida. It's an avenue.
Avenue. Yeah.
Now it used to be Revolucion. Now it's the 6th Street that goes across it. That's the kind of the habit.
That was, I tell you, year I used to go to Revolution was 96, 97, and it was insane over there.
Different time and place. It's very dead now as far as the main strip. It's actually kind of dead now. A lot of the tourism just kind of went away after 9/11. It's kind of started slowing. I remember I talked to a voodoo priest. He was part of the Haitian community that overnight sprang up in Tijuana a few years back after the earthquake. They were trying to gain asylum in the U.S. and they were denied, so they stayed in Mexico in Tijuana. Tijuana is very welcoming to people coming into it. If they follow local rules, that's the main thing, right? They're very protective. They're very nativist.
The cops are corrupt, though, man. I remember how, they would just, it was for nothing. Would pull us over for nothing. It's like, now I got to take you in. For what? Yeah. I just got to take you in. What are you talking about? Well, if you give me $50, I'll let you go. Nothing happened here. Says, well, give me $50. You know what? Just give me $10. You're like, how quickly did you go from 50 to $10?
ATM. Let's write at the ATM. Or how much did they pay us? Right? Or I don't know. Like that is a classic Tijuana thing, specifically for tourists. That is the Tijuana Municipal Police has always had that fame.
It was actually better if you went deeper. If you would go to, is it Mazatlan that has the papas and beer? Who had the papas and beer? I don't know which one.
It's a chain. It's a chain. It's everywhere.
Yeah, it was when you would go 5 hours deeper, you were actually a little bit more chill, and the cops were a little bit more friendly. But Tijuana was interesting. If they knew you had money, they're going to come to you. They're going to try to get some kind of money from you.
Well, this voodoo priest said about Tijuana when he came there, right? Tijuana is like a weird occult mecca, right? There's a bunch of different stuff going on there. So all of a sudden we had voodoo into it, Santa Muerte, Malverde, and all of a sudden the voodoo was going on. And I talked to him about it. It's like, usually in the community that we would move in, voodoo was like, we would come in there was nothing like it. You guys have all this weird stuff happening here. No wonder Tijuana is just one big crossroads to call the devil. That's what he told me.
Wow, a voodoo guy.
The voodoo guy said Tijuana was just one big crossroads. I love my hometown. It's one of the, it was a beautiful place to grow up. It was a fun place. It produces some pretty interesting children like myself. And it kills me to see it in some of the top most dangerous cities list on the planet. It definitely has a lot of potential as a city, and it kills me that that this problem is kind of rife within it.
I have very good memories of Tijuana, man. I mean, it's the stories that you want to tell to your 22-year-old son one day. You're not probably right now, but later on when he's grown up, you may share some of those stories. And you may journal it when you're 75 years old, but you keep it till you're 75 to share some of those stories. But Ed, I got to tell you, man, I'm looking at my phone. I'm like, how the hell did an hour and a half go by so quickly? I mean, first of all, you're a great storyteller. Number two, your optics, giving it to people who are not in it, and you're giving your perspective. It's so revealing of what you're seeing in the news. Someone like you who is actually in it to tell us gives a lot of insight, and the word you use multiple times, perspective. So I appreciate you for coming out and being a guest. Hopefully, if anything happens in the future as well that we want to get some invite, we'll invite you back and you come back and join us.
Definitely. Again, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to talk about some of these experiences. And there are good people in the fight down there. Just putting it out there.
That's good to know. Something tells me that the insurance company I run is 54% Latino, Mexican, and not Mexican, 54% Latino. And we have 17,000 agents. And a lot of them are from Michoacan, Jalisco, Sinaloa, Zacatecas, Oaxaca, Guerrero, all these. They have so much pride about their homeland. It's such a beautiful thing to see. My nanny, Melva, who's been with us now for 10 years, we consider her grandma. I mean, I told her from day one, I said, I don't want you to sing to them in English. I don't want you to talk to my kids in English. I just want you to speak to my kids in Spanish. All my kids, all three of them speak Spanish. I mean, they're pretty much Mexican. They don't even know. They may be half Middle Eastern and white, but they definitely have that Mexican culture in them. They've grown up eating Mexican food from their nanny, but it's a very special culture, special community of people. I love them. They're family to me. And again, thanks for being a guest, Ed.
Thank you.
So interesting stories, complete different perspective for somebody that was in it and saw what was going on. Military, Marines, SF, cops, cartel, different cartel, Rafa Quintero, El Chapo, the level, the new ones coming out. Very different perspective on what's really going on in Mexico. And then you could tell he loves his country, by the way. We could totally tell you he loves his country. So I'm curious about your thoughts, what you took away from the interview with Ed Calderon. And at the same time, if you enjoyed this interview, you want to know a little bit more about this, I did an interview with The Last Narc documentary, a series called The Last Narc, with the story of Hector Bereles. If you've not watched it, click over here to watch that. And if you've not subscribed, please do so. Thanks for watching, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.